Thank you for tuning in. It's so important that in our travel as individuals on this earth, we find ways to emulate the histories that have brought about the realization of what it is that we exist for. Mm-hmm. And in many cases, there are individuals that are profound enough to find out how to characterize it in a way in which everyone can understand. Kevin Maynor is one of those individuals. Mm-hmm. Kevin, I really appreciate you for being able to be involved with our effort to reach our community by providing ways to make them aware of many of the things that are important in our lifestyles that in most cases mainstream media don't find to have a value for it in our community. Mm-hmm. The urban community is always overlooked as not being one that has a culture or even in as much that qualifies in a method that develops the kinds of nuances that generates the history that we have and that we live for each day. Mm-hmm. But there are a number of people like yourself that do find a passion in wanting to not create the, shall I say, relational model of a TV show that is considered to be true life or what they call today reality TV. What you have been able to do is to put together a method that not only prepares an individual for what kinds of arts that there are existent, but where they emulate it from. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for giving us an opportunity to sit down and talk with you.
No, thank you, Herb, for having me.
Well, you know, one of the things that I like to do in my reflection of building a strong foundation of relationship with the people that I involve myself with on a day-to-day basis is to profile who they are.
Okay.
Why don't you talk to us about your lifestyle, your background? Where did you come from?
Okay. I was born in Mount Vernon, New York, and I was raised in a small village called Tuckahoe, New York. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of things happened between the time that I left Tuckahoe and came to Newark, New Jersey. But my wife lived in East Orange, New Jersey. She's actually from Kansas, from Topeka, Kansas. And when I met her in Chicago at the Black MBA convention, being enthralled with her, as time went by, we married. And the discussion came up as to where we would live. And I wanted to live in Harlem, but she didn't want to leave her church. Now, I thought that East Orange was predominantly white. And I said to her, I said, most of my career has involved me with a white population, so to speak, if you will. And I said, I'd like to live in an area where my folk are. And so I would rather live in Harlem. And she said to me, she said, well, what's wrong with Newark? I said, Newark is fine. I said, where would we live? And she said, there's some new places in Newark called Society Hill. I said, okay. So we went over and we looked. We liked it. We bought, and we've been there ever since. And then we bought again, and we're still there.
Wow.
So we like very much being in Newark. And we're very, 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 very involved.
You've traveled around the world, and you, in many aspects, can be recognized as world renowned because of the art that you do perform. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about some of those experiences.
All right. I started singing formally when I was 16 years of age. I was discovered by my music teacher in the hallway, singing with my buddies in a doo-wop group. He took me to, in those days, we had something called the black counselor and the white counselor. And I sang for them. And they thought I had a special kind of talent and that I should develop my voice. So they arranged for me, my music teacher arranged for me to go down and sing for the president of the Manhattan School of Music. His name was George Schick.
Okay.
So I went to Schick's house and sang for him in his apartment. And Schick liked my voice, and he gave me a 2-year scholarship to the Manhattan School of Music. So I went to the Manhattan School of Music. while I was in high school at the same time, and developed my voice with Donald Reed, who was a specialist in working with children's voices at the time. He is deceased now. And from there, I went to Bradley University, got my bachelor's. After that, I went to Northwestern University, got my master's. Then I went to the Moscow Conservatory, and then did my doctoral work at Indiana University, and the Moscow Conservatory gave me an honorary degree. And that's my training.
Okay.
And then I was sort of discovered at the Santa Fe Opera by Columbia artists. Okay. And Columbia, there was a fellow there, a little short white fellow, bald Jewish gentleman, and he said to me, he said, Kevin, what are you interested in? And I said, I like Russian music. As I was, I'm a bass, I'm a low bass. And he said, well, why don't I arrange for you to go to the Bolshoi? So he arranged for me to be an apprentice artist at the Bolshoi. That's exactly how it happened. And then I won the Fulbright to go to the Moscow Conservatory.
Really?
So I went to the Moscow Conservatory. I studied Russian before I left, I would say, about once a week for about 4 hours with a Russian teacher by the name of Xenia Yon. My Russian was pretty good, but when I got to Moscow, I studied 6 days a week, 3 hours a day. I was there for a year, and my Russian now is pretty good.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that they helped me get strong. I learned the language. I learned the roles in the Russian repertoire, and then I learned. One thing led to another, and my background now, I was trained in the Germanic opera and the Italian, everything, and so my voice was now, shall we say, rather developed, and I was starting now to think about getting management. And I did. I got management, and management sort of pushed me into the opera arena, and the ability to do recitals and to sing with the symphony orchestras, and to do oratorio, and all of this type of thing, the different types of things that one would do. But I was very inquisitive about music and different songs and this type of thing. So my repertoire was expansive. While I spoke multiple languages and I learned the music of different people, and while I was studying all of the great Italian operas and the Russian, the German, the French operas in Czechoslovakia and all this stuff, at the same time I was learning art songs. I was learning the art songs, and I was learning spirituals, which are the songs that come from black people, my people, predominantly in the South. Some people call them the slave songs. They are the songs of hope. So I was learning all of this repertoire, Herb, and so I was developing a love for the different types of genre that I could associate myself with. And while I was learning all of this music, I started developing thematic recitals and conceptual concerts and combining them all. Then I took them to the State Department, and because I had very good connections at the State Department because I had won the Fulbright.
Okay.
And so that allowed me to do a lot of different kinds of things. Now that's a quick overview.
That's really good in terms of how you took your networking and evolved it into an opportunity that now has built a strong involvement where you have been able to educate people as well as entertain them in a delightful way. The idea of putting together the Trilogy, an opera company, really now establishes an independent relationship of educating people and at the same time, again, entertaining them in a manner that most folk would not think would find any kind of promising opportunity. Why is the opera company so necessary in our community?
Well, see, okay. I learned, I've sung with all of the major opera companies in our country, the Lyric Opera Chicago, San Francisco, the New York City Opera, the Metropolitan, Dallas, Florida, everybody. So, all of that experience gave me the credibility, if you will, to do something that I really wanted to do. And that was to focus on the works of black composers, all right, and subject matter relative to black people, and to commission composers to write operas on things that I thought were very important, all right. So I started looking at Nat Turner, Frederick Douglass. I started looking at what happened to Emmett Till. I started looking at what went on with the 4 little girls in Birmingham. I started looking at all of these things, and then I looked around the country, and I saw the best of the best, our black composers. I saw some that were just starting out. I saw some that had been around for a long time, and I asked them to write pieces that would be important, that we could involve the entire community around. So if you take a subject like, well, we're getting ready to do one on Paul Robeson, but let's take Frederick Douglass, okay? And we did Frederick Douglass. You take Frederick Douglass, the greatest orator of all time, and you start looking at what he did. You know, he comes from slavery, educates himself, learns to speak with this incredible kind of diction, if you will, and then he talks about American life as it is presented to him as a slave, and as also what he is actually observing. And then you take this, and then you say, okay, we're going to present it in musical form. But at the same time, you're able to share it with the schools. You can share it with big business. You can share it, talk about it with the newspapers. You can involve your historians. You can involve your politicians. All of these people can get involved, and in their individual circles and networks, they can expose themselves and expose all of the people that are around them. Then you develop the entire community, because you've chosen something that's all-encompassing, that everybody can get around and can focus on. A figure that's larger than life, who is excellent, and then someone who has written the writings of Frederick Douglass, his narrative, these types of things. We can get around, and we can focus, and we can develop our families on this type of thing. Not only now while we're doing it, but we can revive these projects, reinvestigate them. They sit in libraries. They sit on our shelves. We can look at them. We can study them. And not to even mention the aesthetic that comes from the organized opera, if you will, okay? Opera is the all-encompassing art form, all right? It requires you to be able to sing without a microphone. And you must have a voice that is pleasing, not only to your immediate surrounding, but reasonably accepted by all people around the world. Most opera singers must develop what I call a world voice. Now, that is a voice that is accepted in its production anywhere in the world. Anywhere.
Wow. Just
by its sheer beauty.
Right.
And then that beauty and the organization of this genre, opera, allows people to be affected all different kinds of ways that we don't even comprehend. You know, I used to sing in school, I still do, in various schools in Newark, and the children would come up to me and they'd put their hand on my chest while I was singing, just to feel the resonance. Or they'd stand behind me. And this was an important encounter for them. It was a developed aesthetic. They could see the difference in projecting the voice, when lowering the larynx and raising the soft palate, making the voice greater or making the voice softer. You know, they could see that, And they could see the advantages of that, how people would actually respond when you did that kind of thing. So that in itself, you know, just by itself was a very important encounter, a very important exposure for our children. And not just our children, Herb. Also for their mothers and their fathers and grandmothers and fathers. They too need exposure. Let's not forget them. We've come to a certain point and station in life where we can have these wonderful programs like you have here, Herb. And we can talk to people where maybe 40, 50 years, there were maybe one or two people could gather themselves and place themselves on a television or on radio and be heard. Now, more of us can do this, and we have the opportunity now to really inform people, and particularly our people.
If you're tuning in right now, we're here with world-renowned artist Kevin Maynor. Kevin, you know, it's amazing that you would share with our audience about the fact that we have an opportunity to represent the classic artwork that you do. But I don't think anything could substitute a live performance.
That's right. That's right. See, that's the name of the game. People spend thousands of dollars to sit up close to hear opera singers or to sit on stage with us while we sing. Now, it is a phenomenon because it's a lot of power, and it involves itself with a great deal of coordination. And you can see it sometimes. You can hear it and you can see it. You can watch the jaw go back, the mouth open wide. You can see the body, sort of the abdominal wall just sort of come in and pushing on the intercostal region in here, you know, pushing the diaphragm up against the lungs. You can watch this process happen if you're up close. You can feel the spit on your face.
Literally. I mean,
Literally.
it's a live action.
It's a live action
and
thing.
The whole response behind it is really enlightening in terms of what it is. And then when you look at the characteristics of the individuals that you're portraying, you know, it's really specifically important for people to realize just how important your artwork really is to our culture. When you did the Emmett Till, the oratoria, and the idea of taking something as tragic as Emmett Till, and then bringing it into an art form, taking it and then creating a musical around it, just give me an idea where you found the opportunity to show the appreciation and then also emulate the educational value behind it.
Okay, this is the thing, Herb. See, take Emmett Till. The last scene in that opera that we did, we would, what we actually did is that we showed his mother, Mamie, opening the casket, if you will, and looking at her son, which she had already seen, whose face was contorted, bloated, and sort of messed up after being beaten and dragged and thrown in the water, mouth opened and stuffed with his own private parts, his testicles and so forth. There he was, all blown up like this, 14 years old, looking absolutely horrible. I don't know if you've ever seen anyone like that who's been exposed to a certain amount of water, a lot of water, and beating. I actually have. But I can only imagine what he looked like in that day and time to the people around him. And see her. So we open up this casket, and we don't show the body. We show you a picture on the wall of what he looked like. And when we did the world premiere of Charles Lloyd Jr.'s Emmett Till, we opened the casket. The mother looks. She screams and falls to her knees, and she sings for 3 minutes of her agony. And then, but you see on the wall this picture of Emmett Till in the casket and what he looked like. And you remember her, what that looked like way back. You know, those pictures in Jet magazine and Ebony, and you can still see them, you know. And so she sings this agony. She doesn't just talk about it, she sings it. So you feel the beauty of the music in that it can represent, as you call it, the agony, the pain, and the suffering in the most beautiful way. I mean, it sounds so ridiculous to speak of the two in the same sentence. But there's a certain kind of beauty that comes from this kind of exposure being shared with other people, so that they come to, the word you used earlier was realization of what the struggle is all about. That in itself is a beautiful thing. It is a sharing, so that people come to the realization of what actually happened and what happened to this woman. They might not understand what happened to the child because he's dead, but she can convey, and she did. She conveyed to us some of her feelings about what it was that she saw. And so opera can take these little small things and can expand them in ways that can't be expanded or cannot be done with, by just simply speaking.
It's clear when you say that, because in most cases what we have been exposed to when it comes to opera, they're tragic, they seem to be long-winded, and in most cases you have no clue what they're saying because they're in a different language. but they take it and project it in in
English.
Yeah, not only in English, but I guess it's just basically metamorphosize it.
Yes.
And say, let's put it to the reality of our culture, but use the same benefit of the art form and show the magic that it can really develop in relationship to educating somebody about a history that many of us had no clue of knowing how it existed.
Boy, Herb, you're a publicist.
I really believe that it's just phenomenal that what you're doing is something that has to be a part of the relationship of what We Care Partners is really about, simply because of the fact that it raises awareness.
Yes.
It's unique, and it has the same texture of something that everybody has always known about, but there's this idea of difference that makes it a classic situation of testimonial all by itself. When you do Paul Robeson, what is it about him that really helps to magnify the tempo of objectivity that make people feel that they were part of his life at that time?
Well, Robeson cared about everybody. Here it is in a nutshell. The great historian John Henrik Clarke said something to me that almost got me in a lot of trouble, I remember. We were doing a documentary together, him, William Warfield, and Betty Allen, and John Henrik Clarke. And I was at his home, and I said to him, Dr. Clarke, what is the difference between Paul Robeson and Marian Anderson? And he said, Marian Anderson was a great voice. Marian Anderson cared about herself. Paul Robeson cared about everybody.
Whoa.
And I thought to myself, I said, uh-oh.
Wow.
But it wasn't whether or not it was true or not, but it was the perception of John Henrik Clarke, of humankind. This was what they perceived about Paul Robeson, is that he cared about everybody. Obviously so, because he spoke like 17 languages. I don't know how many of those were fluent, but he took the time to learn those languages, and I know a little bit about that. That takes some time. See, because language is culture. And it is the language that reveals the culture. And so if you want to know someone, you must know their language.
I realize that because even in how you articulate these concerns that you have in relationship to the projects that you've worked on. Your diction is very profound. And like what you were sharing with us earlier in singing and being taught how to be able to personify your voice and to articulate the words properly makes it a lot better for people to appreciate what you're doing. Do you put a lot of time in making sure that it is clear in terms of that particular responsibility?
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you one thing. I just recently did a recital at Centennial Hall here in Newark, which I hope you get a chance to see. It is available. But the songs were in English, and I insisted that when we were rehearsing the program, that we be sure that people can understand the words. Because it's important to be able to understand the words. Because words have color in themselves. And if you exercise the vowels and the consonants properly, they have their own color. They have their own, they are a piece of art themselves. When we exercise the differences in the vowels and the consonants, not when we just run them all together, but when we truly pronounce and enunciate each, we give them their own integral force. And this is very important, particularly in opera. But I will say this to you. If you cannot understand the language or what people are saying, it will not handicap you in the operatic theater. Because, if I may, the way to go to the opera is to go in this form. Remember that the motivation is the music. Whatever the music is doing is what you should be seeing and hearing and experiencing on stage. For instance, if the music is turning and turning and turning and twisting like this, the singing actors should be doing the same. The stage should be reflective of that. The lighting, the makeup, the hair design should be reflective of that. Not in that particular instance, but you should see it when it happens somewhere on that stage. Or it should be the exact opposite. Now, if it is not one or the other, and you cannot tell what's going on with one or the other, you are watching a bad performance.
Wow. And I guess obviously that has a lot to do with directing and knowing how to be able to transcend the different objectives in terms of the different scenes.
Right.
And basically in regard to that, personality has a lot to do with those kinds of efforts that you make in that regard.
That's right.
Now, how did you develop your personality so that it can reflect that type of imagery?
All right. Well, I don't know if I developed it or not, but exposure does develop the personality. But my mother and father were very open, if you will, and they made sure that I saw and went to a lot of different types of things. In my community, what set dead center in my community was the church. I belonged to a church called Shiloh Baptist Church, and it was a very evolved sort of experience, if you will. I remember our minister was from Morehouse College, and the people in the community cared about one another. And as I think back, so many people in the community were married. So many. Now, and I've just come to that realization just now, just thinking back.
Really?
That's right. So many people in the community, just about, I would say 90% of the community, which was very black, they were married. Now, I think two people working on one thing can be very, very helpful. Possibly you can get twice as much done. Not necessarily. But I think there can be advantages to two people working on something. I guess there can be advantages to one person working on something rather than two. But I have to say, I was moved by the experiences of my mother and my father, which were different. Although my father was from North Carolina and my mother was from Virginia, they were two different types. They were two different types of people. So I got some of my people asked me, well, who had the voice? My father had the power. My mother had the beauty.
Wow.
Her voice was pretty. My father's was powerful. They both sang now. But in the church, there were all kinds of sounds around me because we had great singers in our church. So I had a great concept of sound. My personality was developed by going down south in the summers and at Christmas time, Easter, Thanksgiving, being with the family, listening to people laugh and tell stories, and then watching my parents and the people in my community be kind to one another.
Wow.
There was trouble sometimes, but overall there was respect. There was respect for people that were the oldest. You took time to make sure that they were taken care of, you know, especially if they were alone, if one person had died or something, or whatever the case may be. And then if you were the smallest, you were watched over because you were the smallest and you needed guidance and help. And people would watch over you, you know. There was none of this, you know, let children just do what they want to do, especially when it gets dark, walking home from school very, very late at night. You know, that just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. So in between that time and now, that's happened. And now, I guess the question is, why has that happened? And it's because I believe that some of the messages were not conveyed, particularly by the people in my own age group. We missed it. We didn't do what we should have done. I know this, Herb, because I'm looking at my peers and watching, and many of them, it just didn't convey those things that they learned from their own mothers and fathers, the aunts and uncles and grandparents. They didn't convey those messages. They got into themselves. They had a chance to do something, so they took it. And the children, you know, sort of got lost in that. Clothing changed. You know, we were able to wear things that we weren't able to wear before because of, you know, because of pure economics, and also because education allowed us to travel and be more exposed. Our taste changed, values changed, and we got busy seeing and watching and experiencing these new things that we were not allowed to do.
Technology began.
And technology. Look at the kids now.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen? You know, there's this commercial that's on TV right now.
Which one?
I love it. This kid gets in the car with his father. He's got earphones on. He gets in the car with his father, and then his father pushes a button to start the car, and the kid says, "Dad, you got a new car." He's in the car now, and his father starts the car, and finally, you know, he's got those earphones on. He says, "Dad, you got a new car."
Observation
Yeah, right.
of the changes
That's
in
right.
relationship to how you have been able to put the opera company together.
Yeah.
You're close knit, and our performance level is very involved with continuity of family. Do you ever put out a casting call?
Oh, wow. Oh, boy. A lot of times I don't really put out a casting call, and I'm going to tell you why. I have this thing about auditioning people. Things happen for me, and people didn't make me prove myself, you know. I think of the great tenor, George Shirley, who gave me an opportunity and recommended me for things. And he didn't say prove myself. He listened to me talk, and he said, "Look, I'm going to call this person, and you call that person, and tell them that I said for you to call them." And I do a lot of the same thing. I call around and say, "Well, who's out there? What's going on?" Or I hear somebody, or now I can turn to the internet and listen to people. But I don't know. I'm not a big person to tell them to come to me and walk up on the stage and sing for me. I haven't done it yet.
Really?
Mm-mm.
Well, how have your group evolved, especially because you put on so many different performances, and many of them take on a different role each time you do it?
Well, I listen. I listen to people, and then I do go on the internet and listen to singers, and then people tell me about other people. And if you want to sing for Trilogy and Opera Company, you call me.
That's the bottom line.
That's really it.
Yeah.
That's right. People are honest with themselves. They go online and listen to us, or they listen to me, and they know what the level is, and they know what their responsibility is. So it's on them, And oftentimes it sort of works its way, right. It works out,
Wow.
It works out. And we end up, somebody will call me up and say, Kevin, I remember Nicole Mitchell's a wonderful contralto. And someone said to me, Nicole Mitchell can sing, Kevin, and you ought to hear her. So I hired her. And she could sing.
And she could sing.
Right. Because in our community, we kind of know what is what, So if someone comes to me and they tell me that I know someone that can really sing, and they look at me the right way, and especially if I know they've heard me sing before or someone like me, and if they have the courage to come up to me and say, look, you ought to, and put themselves on the line and say, you ought to hire this person, I assume that the person is really good, and I find my way to them. I might, turn on the computer and listen to him sing on the computer, or, something like that. But very rarely, never. I have never auditioned anyone. Wow. We've done 22 productions.
22 productions.
22 productions in our 10 years.
And you're in a 10-year history.
Yeah, 10-year history from 2004 proper to 2000. Well, almost 10 years, 9 years.
Well, you were in the next phase of another production.
Right.
Talk to us about Robeson.
Okay.
And it's going to be premiering in August, and we're definitely inspired behind the aspects of how you have been able to represent a true cultural value in relationship to African Americans and the art forms. Talk to me about this production. What is it?
All right. This is Robeson, the opera, okay? Written on a libretto, which is the text in which the composer sets the music. The libretto is written by Chanel Perry, who is a director and was an actress now living up in Westchester and New Rochelle. And she has directed me before. She directed me actually in Philip Dean's piece called Robeson, the one that James Earl Jones did on Broadway back in 1979, 1980. And Chanel, though, was confirmed in my mind as the person to write this libretto by the wonderful Woody King Jr., who produces plays, probably one of our foremost producer of plays in the United States. And Woody, he says to me, he said, Chanel writes. I said, wow, I said, yes. So I asked Chanel to write the libretto on this subject, on Paul Robeson. And then the process came to find the composer. And this was going to be really challenging. And, we have three great composers, I guess, that we all sort of look at in the music world, that we have to pay a very close attention to. Their skills are very, very excellent. And they are able to write for the voice and to write for, instrumentation, if you will. And they have a sense of drama and putting things together. Those three I sort of thought of was George Walker, Adolphus Hailstork, and Anthony Davis, senior ones, if you will, senior composers. And then Adolphus Hailstork rose up above them. And Adolphus lives in Norfolk, Virginia, and he's at Old Dominion University. So when I started passing his name around the country to everybody was very excited. They said, "Oh yeah, Adolphus is the one to do it." And so Adolphus Hailstork. It's going to be new to many people in Newark, but the music world knows Adolphus, and they are excited because they know how excellent he is. Without any reservation, this is one of the greatest composers on God's earth. And Adolphus Hailstork is writing Robeson. It's a one act. Now, and Adolphus was concerned because he thought that the piece should be longer, because Robeson is this and that and that and this. Well, that's just the problem. Robeson is this and that and that and this. And in 1998, on his 100th anniversary, I had the good fortune of going to the New York Historical Society exhibition in Manhattan, down on the 80s there in Columbus Avenue. And I saw Robeson all over the wall, and this celebratory of him in pictures. And I could not believe that Paul Robeson was in so many different places and knew so many people. It's just overwhelming. Really? I mean, it is overwhelming. He just completely, as a figure, dwarfs Martin Luther King Jr. Wow. It's just unbelievable. So I wanted to tackle this this person who people would compare me to vocally, and I wanted to try to see what we could do. So we were going to, I called up Amiri Baraka, and I was saying to him, I said, well, you know, how should we look at this thing? And he said, well, don't try to do everything. I said, yeah, I know. So he said, I said, well, I thought maybe I would deal with the racial aspects of Robeson. He said, well, that's good. You know, could deal with one aspect of him. And then we started talking to composers about this. And most of the composers that we were talking to, they too did not want to be trying to write an opera on Paul Robeson. It's just too much. So we went to Charnel, and we said, Charnel, just deal with the racial aspects. We looked at the book Here I Stand that Paul Robeson wrote, and we took out of there the various things that applied to him, Kenyatta and Marcus Garvey and his struggles up in Peekskill, and but it just there was a lot there. But when we gave it to Charnel Perry, she said, there's no way in the world that I can leave out his encounter with Essie, his wife, and what she meant, because she was the driving force. How are you going to not talk about his development in the theater? How can you not talk about the struggle in Spain, Peekskill? What about the Senate hearings? There we were again. Everything. So she ended up with a concept that dealt with exposing us to much of Robeson, but calling on us to answer the questions that are not answered. So in the libretto, you hear mentions of various things that Robeson was involved in or with, and there's no explanation for them.
Really?
So you have to go and do the work.
Wow.
But the sequence is right.
Okay.
And it refers to his struggle and who he is and what he was concerned about. And then Robeson had this way of taking repertoire, music of the world, and programming it in such a way that it spoke politically. All right? And he would choose things that would say, that would, you know, deal with various aspects of struggle in the world, but always reflective of his struggle as a black man in the world, and particularly in America, but in the world as well.
Let me tell you, that is just really profound. You are someone that is very humbling. I am really happy about the opportunity now to have this experience. 'Cause
Well,
that's exactly what it is.
well, thanks,
And
Herbert.
just literally being a part of what's going to happen in regard to this idea of you making the presentation of Robeson
Yes.
is going to be profound. We want to do what we can to ensure that you will get support, especially out of this particular area of our community.
Thank
and
you.
we want to look
Thank you.
forward to continuing to build a strong relationship with you,
Thank you.
because you are truly a, I would say, an heirloom. Because you are an urban legend.
Yeah, thank you.
And
Thank
I
you,
really
brother.
appreciate you very much for coming
No
and
problem.
being part of this experience.
Allow me to say one thing.
Yes,
I
sir.
know I didn't say.
No.
August 3rd is when the premiere will be August 3rd of
Right.
Robeson, and that will be at the Central Theater, which is inside of Central High School. After that, we'll go to Harlem. September 14th, I believe, to 1 Corinthian, and then September 21st, we have just sort of looked at going to SOPAC for an educational exposure
Oh, that's
event.
awesome. Yeah.
And then November 3rd, we go to the New Jersey Performing Arts Center, and I will do a recital called called Paul Robeson Remembered. And at the end, we will do excerpts from Robeson. And then March is the plan to go in and do the full production, the world premiere of Robeson by Adolphus Hailstork at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. And then in the summer, we'll go out in the park, and we'll do Trilogy in the park, and we'll do Robeson in the park. And in that following fall, we go out on Long Island, and we do it out there at OPAC, Adelphi University Performing Arts Center.
So you have vision, you have promise,
Yes,
you have hope,
yes.
and certainly you have a very profound prediction of what is going to be something that's going to be revolutionary.
Oh,
I really appreciate everything that you offered, and I thank you very much for coming and being with
thanks
me today.
again, Herb.
Thank you so much. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you.